This is a mental experiment. It presents an imaginary scenario. The stylized and allegorical nature of the presentation is required to ensure no liberal will be triggered by the presentation. The desire is to ask a potentially highly charged question without infuriating, triggering, or offending anyone. This is an academic exercise. If you are not able to engage in speculative thought or analyze imaginary scenarios, if you cannot grasp the purpose of allegory, it is best you stop reading at this point. If you are a liberal and are interested in exploring a moral question and investigating a moral scenario to understand the dilemma of liberalism better, your participation is sincerely invited. However, if you are not a liberal, imagine you are one. To engage in this experiment, you must take on the identity of a liberal. If you are not one, then pretend you are one. In this thought experiment, the test group holds liberal views about right and wrong. Meaning, at least in the context of this situation, you rely on your emotional reaction to events, to determine what is good or bad. To clarify what we mean by this with a few examples, we will imagine you are okay with free speech, as long as the words used do not cause you to react negatively. As a liberal, the test assumes you are okay with freedom and liberties as long as what is being done by others does not inconvenience you. You know what is good and what is bad because you love what is good and you hate what is bad. Your emotional reaction tells you which is which. Since you know which is which, you only need to rely on your knee-jerk reaction to tell you when something is good or not. In the scenario we wish to discuss, there is a picture of a furbaka. In real life you have no idea what a furbaka is, but in this scenario, you find pictures of a furbaka very offensive. Naturally, as a good person, you have an intense negative reaction when you view pictures of a furbaka. Upon viewing it you feel bad. Your mind and body is repelled by the sight. Your brain is repulsed at the very thought of a furbaka. From this visceral reaction you know furbaka are bad. If you show a picture of a furbaka to your liberal friends, they have similar reactions. Every liberal you show this picture to, are similarly repulsed by it. You are all so revolted by this picture you require counseling, some require medication. What this means, is that the physical reaction all liberals experience upon viewing this picture, is severe and medically corroborated. All liberals conclude furbaka is an unmitigated evil and they are justified in trying to eliminate it. As good persons, you and your liberal friends, join to have images, discussions of furbaka and furbaka banned. Your claim or argument is that pictures, and discussions of furbaka are so offensive, so beyond the pale, so morally repugnant and without any redeeming social value they and all examples of it, must be erased totally, everywhere. The question is, even given that your body and mind reacted negatively to this image, why do you think a physiological reaction to something matters? What is it about the performance or reactivity of your endocrine system, your hormonal system and other chemical and electrical features of your body, that makes these physiological responses meaningful? Why do liberals think their physiological reactions have moral value or cosmic significance? Do liberals think physiology matters more than logic? Do you think the endocrine systems have more to say concerning moral issues, than the mind? No one disputes you have not had a severe chemical reaction to the electrical activity of your eyes sending impulses to your brain. No one is saying that these peculiar set of signals did not cause a very real set of chemical reactions in your body. Everything up to this point is agreed to and accepted. What the question is, how come your brain gave you the thought that others ought to care about your physiological reaction? How does the liberal brain go from, my body has had an unpleasant chemical response to a set of electrical impulses, to the conclusion that everyone else ought to be concerned because of that physiological reaction? What happened in your brain or physiology to make your brain think your physiology matters to anyone else? If you as a liberal are having serious physiological problems with something, ought not the medical establishment find some way of correcting your physiology? You might benefit from being hooked up to an apparatus that sends electrical signals to the pleasure centers in your brain. Would this not be a more physiological satisfying solution, to what is a physiological problem, than engaging in political upheaval? What are your thoughts on this? Would you not prefer to have a doctor adjust your physiology, so you feel pleasant sensations, when faced with things like a picture of a Frabaka, than engaging in the unpleasant acts of trying to eliminate what annoys you? Would it not be cheaper and less socially disruptive to treat the physiological symptoms, than to eradicate what you find objectionable? Would it not make more sense to use a chemical solution, on you, than us trying to change the world, because of how you feel? Or do your principles not permit you from treating the real source of the problem, which is you? There is nothing inherent in an image that is painful. All pain originates in the person feeling it. Therefore, the real solution is to treat the person feeling pain because of a word or image. If certain words distress you, you need medication. There is nothing in a word that can cause a physiological reaction. A deaf person is not distressed by the words you are. A blind man is not caused distress by the images that cause you pain. So, there is nothing in words and pictures that are intrinsically harmful. The harm originates in the person who say they are being harmed. Why does the image and name of Trump not cause universal derangement? Why does Trump derangement syndrome only impact certain people? The problem cannot lay with Trump but with those who are deranged by him. There is no known causal connection between the world and mind. What is in the world cannot directly impact the mind. Indeed, for all intents and purposes, the physical world does not exist. Everything we claim exists is only real within your mind. Nothing you see, feel, hear, smell or taste exists outside of your mind. You create it all. You can claim there is a stimulus, but there is no stimulus that is not also in your mind. The question is, what do liberals see when they view Trump? From their reaction they see something of frightening proportions. Does he remind them of their father? What is it about the image of Trump that invokes such an intense reaction in a small minority of people? We see this in other phobias. While some might have a possible rationalization, such as a fear of heights, most make no sense from a rational perspective. Conservatives believe in free speech, but not because we are intellectually superior. The truth is, what others say does not trigger those who are conservative, to the extent words trigger liberals. We believe in free speech because words do not matter to us in the way they matter to a liberal. We believe in smaller governments, not because a smaller government is innately superior to a larger one. Conservatives are more self-reliant, not because we are better people. We do not get emotionally distraught over every ill that befalls us, so we are not overwrought when other people experience problems. We are less likely to be overwhelmed by events that happen to us. We expect less and are less concerned when we do not get it. Liberals appear to need a perfect world to experience equanimity. Whereas a conservative may not be bothered by the idea of unemployment, for a liberal, losing a job is a disaster. It is Trump expressing conservative values bluntly, that drives liberals into a frenzy of hate. To not be touched deeply by the idea of someone thinking they are in the wrong body is, to a liberal, unimaginably cruel. They see no cost in doing so, and so, to refrain from engaging in the ploy of affirmation, is the only possible tack to take, unless one is a hateful person. And so we glean the idea that liberals are driven by emotion and conservatives are prone to common sense. This, however, appears to be shallow in the way the situation is analyzed. Conservatives are just as capable of being emotional when the time arises. That there are fewer times a conservative is overwhelmed with emotion than what liberals encounter, does not mean conservatives lack emotion, nor does it mean conservatives lack empathy. The problem for liberals, and indeed conservatives, is that the emotion of a liberal does not remain personal, that is private. The horror a liberal feels is not internalized, it is externalized. The level of horror and antipathy the liberal feels, is an indicator of how much energy he or she will put into galvanizing a community-wide response. Hence the BLM riots and demonstrations in support of Palestine. The liberal does not attempt to persuade others but to intimidate them. The division between those who believe as a liberal does and those who dissent is not a line marking a difference of opinion, it is the line between good and evil. For the liberal position to be valid, it ought to impact all human beings, unless they lack a moral sense. But what is it about a person being killed, that makes human death wrong in the deepest sense of the word? Even if it is emotionally distressful, why do liberals think murder is wrong? But then liberals even agonize over the execution of mass murderers, as if there is something sacred with all human life. But of course, logically speaking, there cannot be a universal concern for life simply because there are too many people without any respect for life. So why ought human life any value for a liberal? Where do liberals get the moral outrage from when their reaction has no foundation outside of their own bodies? What if a liberal lacked all feeling and all empathy? What if we were dealing with a sociopath who lacked the ability to identify with his victims, and therefore only had his or her feelings to act upon, but none of these feelings were associated with other people? A sociopath lives only for himself as he has lost any interest in the needs and feelings of others. What moral boundaries does a sociopath have, having never developed any emotional regard for others? The difference between a conservative and a liberal is that conservatives are righteous or on the path to it. Righteousness stems from dikaiosune, which means living in right relationship with God. We act with righteousness when we live justly, honestly, and faithfully according to God's instruction. The righteous person strives to be morally right or justifiable in the eyes of God by fulfilling the criteria set by God. Therefore, the conservative is bounded by strictures laid down by God. The believer is filled with righteousness. We are not merely following a set of guidelines, we are inwardly and outwardly transformed. The difference is measurable as it is observable. But liberals have nothing to guide them but their own predilections. They, the liberals, want freedom, for all they have is their own natures to guide them. For this they need to be free, meaning free of the strictures of others' and convention. This is why we find liberals siding with the idea of gender identity. For a liberal, nothing trumps how a person feels. So if a girl feels as if she is a boy, there is no objective way to contradict her. In fact, no liberal would want to, as support for her subjectivity is a defense of their own. But if the height of morality is to allow everything to have their own truth, there is no morality. The crucial element of morality is that it is not attached to humans. To be moral is to adhere to a standard that is not human in origin, because humans are not naturally moral. The point of logic that confounds liberals is that a morality not tied to humanity is necessarily tied to God. Indeed, the only source for absolute morality is God. But if we deny God and therefore the only source of morality, what is your morality tied to but the subjective and ever-changing opinion of human beings? A morality that has to be decided upon by a human agent is an ethics. It is not a morality. Humans create ethical systems. God creates moral truth. The question is, how do humans, and liberals specifically, create a morality devoid of laws? And if one's code of conduct is enshrined in law, how is it not an ethical system? Ethical systems are legal systems in which laws govern behavior. Morality is intrinsic to the nature of reality. Morality is baked into creation. It is not wrong to kill human beings, but it is morally wrong to even think negative thoughts about them when it offends God's law. The question is then, how do liberals live a moral life without God when the only way to live without God is under an ethical code? And if you choose to live under an ethical code, what role does morality have when by law it is the system of regulations that must take precedence? Ethics drives out morality. Without God you must live as a legalist, under the law, and that makes you an ethical person, not a moral one.